Well, it's super exciting, and people have been following New Zealand. We are taking a very much a science lead in this new realm for us, actually having a crack at drilling down to that depth, around 4.5 kilometres possibly, we don't know.
The super exciting thing we're hearing about there is a plan to drill down deep under the Earth's crust to reach super hot fluids. I'm talking more than 400 degrees Celsius. It's the first for New Zealand. It's got $60 million in government funding, and it's happening at Rotokawa Geothermal Reservoir just north of Taupō. It is supercritical geothermal energy. And if all goes to plan, this project, dubbed Deep Heat, will be the start of something that could deal to our reliance on fossil fuel.
It will actually be as close to what I'd call a silver bullet in terms of what is really required on climate change.
I'm Sharon Brett-Kelly. Today on The Detail, two cutting-edge renewable projects. One will drill up to 6 kilometres into the earth for supercritical geothermal energy, and the other will turn forestry slash into a replacement for coal for industrial users like Genesis Energy.
A fuel which is under our control.
After our podcast on the government's planned billion-dollar liquefied natural gas plant, we got a bit of feedback from listeners urging us to explore the energy sources being developed that would not only shore up our supply, but are renewable. One out-of-the-box idea from a listener is that the government installs nuclear-powered small modular reactors next to the Tiwai Point aluminium smelter. We might pick that up another time. Today, though, we're looking at two projects with government backing. First, Deep Heat. Former Climate Change Minister Tim Grosser chairs the Supercritical Governance Group.
You've got this deeply fractured rock. You've got the magma, the super hot core of the Earth, close to the surface. The combination of this gives our country probably the best place on the planet to try to be the first country to actually crack the engineering problem. And that's what I've got $60 million to do.
Right, let's get into supercritical geothermal, because I would say most people don't know what it is.
It is the heat that you can extract from fluids when they, A, exceed 374 degrees Celsius, and B, it's an important thing, both conditions have to hold, you can bring them to the surface and still maintain pressure at 220 bars. What this does is convert the form of the fluids into more like a gas, which has greater density and produces approximately 3 to 4 times as much energy as conventional lower heat, lower pressure geothermal steam does. The simple way of putting this, it's a massive gain of bang for the buck. Deep heat is the science term used by Earth Sciences New Zealand. And we may well do a little bit of a rebranding. But look, putting the name aside, if you dig down anywhere on the planet, you would eventually get to what is called the brittle ductile transition, which is a transition zone between very high heat and then superheat from the Earth's magma. The huge advantage of Aotearoa New Zealand is twofold. First of all, we have a vast resource that certain of the GNS scientists who still advise me say is probably as big as any resource in the world in terms of supercritical geothermal energy. And secondly, it lies not only at very shallow depths by comparison with other places in the world, though there are other places where you can access this heat at shallow depths, like Iceland, but also the rock is highly permeable, meaning that the geothermal fluids can flow through the rock. We don't even need to have a political argument about fracking in this because God did it for us.
This is in Rotokawa, near Taupō. What does it look like? I mean, has work actually started?
Well, no, we haven't started putting a hole in the ground for supercritical, but there's a lot of geothermal activity you can see around Rotokawa.
But when will an actual hole in the ground be put in for the supercritical?
Well, we hope to start around about the middle of next year. But there's something really important for people to understand, which is it's not quite true to say nobody has ever tried to do this, because the Icelandics tried to do this in the period of about 2009, well, actually to the present day.
This is what the Icelanders were trying to do with their deep drilling, creating a supercritical well. You might think that hitting upon magma and wrecking their equipment would have discouraged them, but not so. Yes, they had these nasty gases and their drill got stuck in the magma, but it's not like they accidentally created a volcano. So they're doing it again, but this time on purpose. It's called the Krafla Magma Testbed.
And we're working very, very closely with the Icelandics. Will New Zealand ever be able to access this renewable energy? Absolutely dead certain. The question is when. Is it in our generation, or will we have to wait, unfortunately, another generation or maybe a half generation for the technologies that are being developed now? Because this is attracting attention right around the world that has geothermal options.
And it's going to be a collective approach with across the globe, from the Japanese, the Americans, the Icelandics, everyone working together to try and solve these engineering problems to get down there and get some fluid out.
That's Mark Gibson from Earth Sciences NZ talking about the project just after it went public a few months ago.
There's a lot of science and there's a lot of engineering problems that we need to do around that to see what the fluids are going to. We don't know until we get down there. So, but it's all on in New Zealand at the moment. So we're getting super hot down there.
We're all crossing our fingers that it's within the next 5 to 10 years, because it will actually be as close to what I'd call a silver bullet as exists in the real world in terms of what is really required on climate change, which is the electrification of the rest of our energy system. I mean, that's the global solution. And also enormous potential economic development opportunities.
So I suppose the focus in New Zealand at the moment, in the context of where we're getting our energy from, is the announcement of this new LNG terminal. From what you're saying, this supercritical geothermal energy couldn't be a replacement for that. It wouldn't be up and running in time to take over something like that.
No, you're 100% right. Just so you know where I'm coming from. I'm completely opposed to idealists on climate change who imagine that we can make the real progress we need to make on the total energy picture, whether it's in New Zealand or globally, in some immediate step. We are involved in an energy transition, and therefore the use of gas, which typically will produce 65% fewer emissions than coal, providing your baseload electricity, is part of that transition. It is not the part of some very, very long-term solution, except in part, small part, one would hope. But it is absolutely essential that we move away from coal, and gas will be part of that solution. So, we've got to have a world in which we both meet huge increases in energy, but in order to meet the climate change requirements long term, it is essential that we transition to renewable energy, or rather to a variety of technologies that produce not necessarily zero emissions, but far, far fewer emissions, resulting in a net zero when you net everything else out.
And is that what you're saying this project could do? It'd come close to...
Oh, make a huge, huge contribution. The models all tell us that if we can actually crack the engineering problems, and it's not a science problem, it's an engineering problem, and successfully bring supercritical grade heat to the surface in the Taupō region, we can make a massive contribution to the growth of electricity demand. And there's another vital thing that many people forget, and that is the issue of baseload. When you talk about the energy trilemma, actually the peak of that pyramid is energy security, not energy price. That's the second of the trilemma, because if we have a whole society which depends on electricity 24/7, 365 days a year, as we do, we must have a surety of supply. So you've got to provide what's called baseload energy that is not weather dependent.
And this is it.
Now, there are various. I mean, this is it for New Zealand. We don't need nuclear, in my opinion. We've got potentially, we can replace all the current use of coal and a great deal of other fossil energy if we could actually make this thing work over the next 25 years.
So right now, there's a sort of an international team of scientists who are working on this project that they've dubbed Deep Heat. What are the dangers of drilling that deep into the earth and not really knowing what exactly is there?
There's a spectrum of risks. There is catastrophic risk, but that occurs with conventional depth, which is the damn thing blows up. And I know this because one of the bores that we drilled in Indonesia did exactly that. But every single geothermal well that's ever been drilled in New Zealand has got that risk. So there's nothing specific about supercritical. It's different, but that's the ultimate risk. So we've got to have a plan, and the brilliant team of engineers from Contact Mercury and other, I mean, they're developing a disaster strategy. But the real risk is we fail to be able to bring supercritical fluids to the surface for a number of reasons, the most important of which is the technology to deal with a sudden degree of thermal expansion, the super corrosive nature of the fluids we expect from modeling to be there, mean that the well simply collapses in a technical sense, which is what happened in Iceland.
How much of a dent would the whole geothermal thing, and I guess in particular the supercritical side of it, how much of a dent would that make into our use of fossil fuels? Is it sort of endless, unlimited, infinite?
In the long run, going into the next century, we're not the only country starting to rethink geothermal. If you ask about scale, here is a factoid to end all factoids to show you the gigantic scale of it. Inside the Department of Energy, in the United States, is the world's largest producer in absolute terms of electricity from geothermal. Okay, by the way, we're the fifth largest in the world in absolute terms. And inside the Department of Energy's website, there's a specialized outfit called the GTO, Geothermal Technologies Office. And inside their website, here's this factoid. They say, on the basis of current estimates of what might be feasible into long term in terms of supercritical geothermal energy in the United States, if we exploited only 1% of current estimated potential, 1%, that would be equal to 4 times total electricity output of the United States.
And you're talking about, I guess optimistically 5 to 10 years, that if all goes well?
If all went very well, I'm working on the basis of engineering advice that says it would take about 10 years before we'd see commercial level electricity in bulk coming out of supercritical. It would then be invested, we would then be looking at a 25 to 40-year period beyond that. So I won't be around, unfortunately, to monitor it.
It could still fail. That's the thing.
It could still fail, but go back to the concept of failure that the scientists and the engineer have. Even failure will give us an edge, which we will use in future generations.
Now, something that really is on track is just a couple of hours' drive away in Kawerau, where Australian company Foresta is building a $300 million factory to make torrefied wood pellets. They're small black pellets that are already being lined up to replace coal at Genesis Energy's Huntly Power Station. As a biofuel, they form part of a plan the Bioenergy Association put up as an alternative to the LNG plant. The plan was ignored, but association head Brian Cox says it's a recognised, reliable energy source that uses forestry waste. And that's what Foresta is tapping into.
They would likely be the first to make this black pellet, which is that direct replacement for coal. Internationally, plants that have been constructed for using this. In New Zealand, Genesis Energy imported some of these black pellets and trialled them in the Huntly Power Station to see whether they could be used as a coal replacement in the Huntly Power Station, and very successfully they could be. And so that's what's given Genesis Energy the confidence to look buying these black pellets, if they can be made locally, and to be able to use them to replace the coal they currently import.
The impact of that would be huge because in an average year, Genesis Energy's Huntly Power Station burns up to 500,000 tonnes of coal. In dry years with declining gas and low wind, that can push out to 1 million tonnes. Most of the coal has come from Indonesia, though Genesis now has a new local coal deal with BT Mining to supply some of it.
And so use in a Huntly-type power station is a good use. In New Zealand, there are other big boilers that Fonterra in particular has, which it could be used in there. And there are distinct advantages why they might do that over wood products. But additional to the domestic market is the export market, because in Asia, Japan, Korea, there are power stations for the similar design as the Huntly Power Station. And so they would be also potential customers. And we get a number of calls from Southeast Asia for people who are looking to purchase wood fuel. And the one that they would really like would be the black pellets.
Brian, you put forward a proposal to the government on building bioenergy projects as an alternative to LNG. Am I correct on that? You were asked to put forward a proposal?
Well, we weren't actually directly asked. The minister, when he was talking about going out for a proposal for LNG, I was asked, would he accept alternatives to that? And he said yes. So we submitted a proposal to them, which we call the Integrated Bioenergy Program. And that has a number of elements that would free up gas that is currently being used where wood fuel could be a replacement. And so that gas could be used to other more valuable uses. We could also free up electricity because heat can be produced by wood in a boiler or electricity. So our proposal from a bioenergy solution is to free up the electricity and gas that is under constraint at the moment, and where the prices are high, whereas bioenergy solutions can be a lot cheaper.
And something like the Foresta project, what it plans to do, would that be part of that whole bioenergy proposal?
Yes, we had three main parts of it, and the utilisation of biomass in Huntly Power Station using fuel that would be produced by Foresta or anyone else is one of our threads. The other one was helping food processors who are currently using gas for their heat to change to wood fuel, and that would free up the same amount of gas that the LNG is talking about. And the third arm was finishing the work that government started a few years ago of making all government-owned facilities fossil-free. These are schools, hospitals, swimming pools, which instead of using a fossil fuel could be on wood fuel. And this would free up the electricity or gas that they would otherwise use.
Those users, like say if a hospital changed to wood chip or the pellets, would it have to invest in other equipment to enable that?
It may or may not. Fonterra, for example, has been able to convert a lot of its boilers from coal by using wood pellets. It's been able to use it as a drop-in fuel, and it's been very cheap. They use exactly the same boiler. They often have to change some of the fuel handling components. Other boilers are not so suitable for transitioning from coal to using a wood fuel, and clearly a gas boiler needs to be replaced by a wood fuel boiler. But the option of using these bioenergy solutions is often a cheaper total cost to that food processor or whoever, a swimming pool, hospital, than the price of gas and electricity is heading to. Christchurch Hospital is already on biomass. The Canterbury University, the number of food processors throughout the country are already transitioned from fossil fuel to that. What our proposal to government was to speed that up and make it a nation-building project that would be focused on freeing up electricity and gas, which would avoid the need for new production, and it would also affect the price. So our alternative to the LNG option was to, hey, let's deal directly with the problem we've got, which is energy availability and cost.
What kind of response have you had?
Well, we haven't had any response at all from the government because they're focusing on their LNG option. We've not heard back from them at all on our proposal. They did, we understand, look at a biomass solution, but that was, we understand, building a new electricity production facility using biomass just as a fuel. Whereas we're saying, look, why can't we repurpose much of what infrastructure we already have by smart thinking of converting from using that boiler on particular fuel? So some of it would be black pellets, some would be white pellets. We can use the cheaper chip, different solutions to part of the country. We've got adequate biomass for this. If we look at the amount of residues that are left on the ground and the wood processes, the chips and the shavings, but we also export a lot of low-value logs, which we could use as our own fuel. So it's crazy that we have a problem on terms of availability of energy when we're exporting it in the form of logs. If we work together, and the problem is bioenergy is a complex market. There's a lot of players in it. We've got the forest owners, we've got the contractors, we've got the trucking firms. So it does require much more coordinated. But throughout the country, we have seen this is working. South Island particularly, because the previous government had a ban on coal on the South Island, and that has triggered the fact that this replacement of coal with biomass is already well advanced down there.
Is it completely environmentally sound?
Yes, it's a carbon neutral situation. So under the IPCC rules on climate change is that bioenergy is considered to be a circular type arrangement where the CO2 that is produced is then absorbed by the trees again and then produces more trees and then it comes out when it's used as a fuel, and so it goes around in a cycle, provided that you're replanting. So there is a bit of carbon emissions from the small amount of transport and harvesting. The fuel itself is carbon neutral. So we need to look as a country at the holistic aspect. It is not just a forest contractor or a grower that needs to be talked with. It is all of us.
That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. This episode was produced by Gwen McClure and engineered by Mark Chesterman. Thanks to Brian Cox and Tim Grosser. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly. Ka kite.